Cecilia and the Sea God. Short romance story by Misha Quinn. All rights reserved. Copyright 2023. Narrated by McMinster Synthetic Voice, Pro Max License, 2023. Cecilia and the Sea God. The sea was splashing with complete indifference to the one who had devoted herself to serving it. Well, not the sea, but sailing. And what did she, Cecilia, have left now? Nothing. A full but well-shaped middle-aged woman sat with her mermaid tail hanging down from the jetty's edge and looked out at the surf. The waves were lapping at the beach in the early morning, before sunrise, yet filled with tourists vacationing in the resort. And what would change in her life if many people were on that beach? Nothing. All these people were strangers to her. They were just clients for whom Cecilia gave her performances, one after the other, with short breaks for the opportunity to take off her elaborate mermaid outfit and take a break. Cecilia knew she should not work so hard, but could not help it. Swimming, especially as a mermaid, had been her passion since childhood. Cecilia thought about the fact that she had been dragged to the pool by her friends, who were always telling her she should lose weight, and, to do so, she should exercise vigorously. Cecilia followed their advice, became a professional athlete, and won many competitions in different styles of swimming. But most of all, she liked swimming underwater calmly, sliding her body, without the high loads and training usual for competitive swimmers. Yes, about her weight. Cecilia's weight was never close to ideal. But the girl was not discouraged, and everything in her life went according to plan. First love, marriage, but she and her husband had no children, and something in the relationship broke down. The couple separated. Cecilia and her first husband separated without scandals and disputes about the division of property, which was already an achievement. Cecilia, who had completed her college education by the time she divorced her first husband, went to work as a nurse in a hospital. She found time to swim in the pool in her spare time between shifts. One day, while watching a television program about the entertainment world, she saw an interview with a professional mermaid. "Wow, is there such a thing?" thought the young woman, and after finding a company that made mermaid clothing for the customers' measurements, she ordered and received her first mermaid costume. Everything about the outfit was perfect. After immediately trying out her mermaid costume in the pool, Cecilia decided that from now on, she would work part-time as a mermaid at parties. This part-time job, which she did in her spare time, brought her more pleasure than money. However, in the world of enthusiastic people, Cecilia found like-minded people and friends who did not pay any attention to her unusual weight for a mermaid. They valued Cecilia's balanced character and love for their shared passion, the world of mermaids. Gradually, Cecilia switched to working as a mermaid and constantly looked for opportunities to get work orders. There were few, but the party for the children, which was organized yesterday in the hotel complex of the sea resort, was well paid and greatly pleased the children and her. "So what's the matter? Why am I depressed?" Cecilia thought, looking at the waves. "Am I so lacking in simple human warmth and tenderness? Have I not learned to live without a man in my life? Or is it just my body that wants affection and tenderness so much?" Cecilia sighed heavily and, leaning one hand on the pier's edge, deftly jumped into the sea. The seawater gripped her body tightly and rocked her in its waves. The woman was lying face up in the water, arms wide open, looking up into the morning sky. Not all the stars had yet been extinguished in the pale morning sky. The salt water was so dense compared to the fresh water of the pool that Cecilia was pleased to feel that she did not have to make any effort to stay on the water's surface, despite her mermaid garb. Usually, Cecilia would take care of her costume and not swim in the salty sea water that was gradually eating away the paint from the surface of her outfit. The woman turned face down, opened her eyes in the water, and, trying not to make any sudden movements, tried to see what was happening around her. And underwater, there was a lot to see. An arc of pink light was rising from the bottom of the sea. Then, it was a dome glowing with pink light. A human-like figure was visible in its center. Someone must be scuba diving here. But why so early? Thought Cecilia, relieved it was not a shark. The air from his breathing apparatus must have created this dome effect around the diver rising from the sea depths. Actually, why not? After all, I've been swimming in the sea since early morning, too, and in my work clothes. Cecilia continued to ponder, returning to her relaxed state. The woman spread her arms out again and closed her eyes as she floated on the water's surface. Suddenly, something touched Cecilia as if someone's hand lightly ran a palm across her back. "And what are you doing here?" A low male voice suddenly sounded right in her ear. "I wasn't expecting anyone to visit this morning." The stranger's voice sounded a little mocking and surprised. Cecilia turned upright in the water in surprise, but her mermaid tail resisted the water, and it failed. The woman twisted around in the water, trying to get into a position where she could see the unexpected guest better. And the man, perfectly upright in the water, floated beside her and looked mockingly at the woman. Cecilia finally found a position to stay upright in the water and swam up to the man, helping herself with her arms. At first, Cecilia thought it was a scuba diver. But as soon as she saw him, wow, the man was not wearing scuba equipment, but even ordinary swimming trunks. In the relatively clear water of the sea bay, Cecilia could see his mighty torso and whole body below. And that body was wow. She found her colleague, this man with a fishtail instead of legs. The woman smiled at the stranger and immediately felt that there was something between them that connected them. They shared a common hobby, swimming as mermaids, and that was so rare. Cecilia had only one male acquaintance among professional mermaids, and he was lovely. But he was not her type, so Cecilia did not expect their relationship to go beyond mere acquaintance. And here, oh God, she loved everything about him. A broad smile, his long dark curly hair that fell in heavy waves over the mighty shoulders of a great swimmer. She could not take her eyes off him, so singularly blue beneath the black lashes. His eyebrows were perfection itself, thick, spreading apart like the wings of an albatross. His nose was straight, with a slight hump that gave away the proud character of a lord of the seas. Cecilia thought he would have played Poseidon better than in the movie she'd seen recently. Yes, that actor had been good, but this man was just the epitome of a sea god. Or was it the surprise of meeting such a handsome man that made Cecilia think that? The woman looked embarrassed and finally responded to her guest's greeting. "Well, I wasn't expecting you. I'm resting here. Haven't you noticed that?" There was a playful note in the woman's voice. Cecilia felt the sudden change in her voice, how it became chestier and longer. The stranger floated beside her and stared at her unwaveringly. He gawked. Her face, then his gaze, traveled lower under the water. He could see her mermaid costume, but the stranger did not seem surprised. He said, "I see I have interrupted your enjoyment of this beautiful morning. I'm sorry." He turned to swim away from Cecilia, but she immediately called out to him. "No, don't go. No." There was so much pleading in her voice that the man turned to her and swam closer again. His gaze was so tender and understanding that Cecilia dared to say what was in her heart. "I don't want to be alone this morning. My name is Cecilia, and yours?" she said. "Nice to meet you. My name is Poseidon." Somehow, Cecilia was not surprised by the name. "Good alias," she said, looking understandingly at the man and his dark eyes. "That suits you. Well, in that case, I'm a mermaid," she said. There was sarcasm and some disappointment in the woman's voice. "Why is he lying? Doesn't he want to be called by his real name? It means he doesn't like me, she thought, unable to tear her gaze away from the stranger hypnotizing her. But the man immediately answered, and his voice was amiable, just as it had been at the beginning of their conversation. Why should it be a pseudonym? It's my name, the man replied and grinned. Cecilia was embarrassed. She did not know what to say to correct her mistake. She struggled to get the words out without looking the man in the eye. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, the man continued. Believe me, my name is Poseidon. And I know your name is Cecilia. You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not a demon, just a sea god. Cecilia stared dumbfounded at her new acquaintance. Okay, the man could have any name, but how did he know everything about her? At first, she thought the new acquaintance was continuing to taunt her. And he was doing it because she was so unattractive. After all, real mermaids are all slender, and she was the only one, a woman in a body, who was often mocked by her acquaintances because of that. Why was it that only she thought this Poseidon was better than other men who usually just wanted to have fun with her without the long-term relationship she had sought after her first failed marriage? And this type is the same, just mocking her. The man seemed to understand the doubts that tormented her, and, holding his hand to Cecilia, said conciliatingly, I am not mocking you. I am the sea god, Poseidon. Look. He waved his hand, and something huge, glowing with lights, rose from the depths of the sea. The woman looked down into the water. An ancient sailing ship approached them, and all its sails were in place. How is that possible? Cecilia thought. It's a ghost ship. Cecilia still could not believe her eyes. Am I dreaming? She thought, but an extraordinary sense of wonder simultaneously filled her soul. No, I'm seeing all of this for real. But even if it is a dream, I wish it wouldn't end, the woman thought. Poseidon held his hand to her, and she took it without hesitation. The man pulled Cecilia down into the water toward the ship. Cecilia did not think about how long she could stay underwater. The human ability to swim without breathing apparatus is minimal, it is only minutes. But she was so eager to be on this marvelous ship that she dived into the seawater, following her new acquaintance. Wow, his name is Poseidon, though she thought, pointing down towards the ship. But now he can be a god, and I can be his companion. Let it be only for a moment, but I shall feel happy beside him. The woman dived in with Poseidon. In a couple of seconds, they were on the deck of the sailing ship, whose hulk rose ever higher and soon showed above the water's surface. The water ran off the deck, on which Poseidon led the way to the captain's cabin, which towered above the rest of the ship, and seated Cecilia in one chair that stood there. He lay down on the boardwalk at her feet. The man leaned back on the floor and, looking at Cecilia with a satisfied look, settled his fishtail and swung his arm again. The most extraordinary sea creatures Cecilia had ever imagined appeared on the deck. There were handsome men with flippers on their feet, not flippers, but webbing. And the webs were not only on their feet but also on their arms. Then the mermaids appeared on deck, carried by giant octopuses on nets suspended like hammocks between their tentacles. Each mermaid had her peculiar coloring. If she had red hair, her body was copper. If she had blue hair, her body would be blue. Her body was shimmering with all shades of red, as if she had pink hair. But the main thing about their image was that they held themselves completely naturally, and were not at all embarrassed to meet an earthly woman in the company of their lord. Each of the mermaids sent an air kiss to Cecilia, and the octopuses arranged their charges so that each could talk to Poseidon and his companion if she wished. Cecilia did not know where to look. Everything and everyone here was just like a fairy tale. The woman felt like she had entered one of the children's parks. But no human imagination could have created what was in front of her. As more sea creatures came on deck, many borne by more brutal sea creatures like giant ocean crabs, Poseidon looked at Cecilia with a sidelong glance. He was studying his guest's reaction to what he had presented to her. The woman silently accepted the greetings of his entourage. She nodded, responding to the beaux air kisses sent her way. Cecilia noticed that no earthly man who had ever stood before her could compare to Poseidon. His body was so perfect that it almost hurt her to look at him. But why would I look at a man who all the women of his kingdom desire? Even if he is a true sea god, then what? I, who adore swimming in the sea, should worship him, but I feel something else besides mere admiration. I desire him, and it is utterly in vain. He'll never pay attention to me. I couldn't get a normal man to be my life partner, let alone a god, thought Cecilia. A shadow of sadness appeared on her face. The woman lowered her head and stared at the floor haltingly. Poseidon noticed the change in her mood. He dabbed his hand on her knee, the latex-covered artificial mermaid's tail, and said, I see you're sad. Don't you like my world? Cecilia, who shuddered at his touch, was embarrassed and replied, sliding her eyes over his face. No, I'm absolutely thrilled. I just... Do you want to go home? He continued questioning. No, not now. I can't. To be compared to the beauty of my approaching ladies? Poseidon asked slyly, looking affectionately at Cecilia. How does he know what I'm thinking? How? She was confused, not knowing what to say to such a direct question. But yes, that was precisely what she had been thinking just a moment ago. The sea god continued, Pay no attention to them. They are the spawn of water and darkness, and you are the spawn of earth and light. You are completely different but so close. And that's because you're so fascinated with the sea. Have you ever wondered why you like the image of a mermaid so much? Cecilia stared at Poseidon in amazement, stunned by his words. No, I just like to swim, she replied, looking at him expectantly. The woman realized that her new acquaintance wanted to tell her something she did not know about herself. Poseidon continued, There are mermaids in our midst who are born of mermaids. But some are born of men and come to us of their own accord. Oh, those aren't the ones that drowned, are they? Cecilia asked with a shudder. Poseidon raised his eyebrows in surprise, then laughed in relief and replied, No, not those. Those mermaids who come to us of their own volition are like you. They are the ones who want to live exactly as we live underwater. But our lives are not just about celebrations and pleasures. We have enemies, those who claim the throne of ruler of the seas, and those who would like to take all power on this planet into their own hands. So those who come to live in our world forever are fully aware of what they are walking into. He was looking at Cecilia with a challenging gaze, clearly reading the thoughts on her face. The woman sighed and felt frustrated as she thought that even if the possibility of coming to the sea god's world war were real, at least in this dream she was in, she would have to leave her family behind. And she could not do that, as she loved them so much. Cecilia realized she would not get such an offer from Poseidon again. And she raised her head firmly, looked straight into his eyes, and answered, I'd like that, but... No need to go on, I understand. Poseidon interrupted her quietly. What I have offered you is not the only solution. I can see that you are too attached to your earthly life. You have many relatives. But there's no way you'll find happiness on the shore. Cecilia was suddenly compelled to answer him with what she had just thought. There was a passion in the woman's voice that she had long held back, and a sudden sense of hope for something vaguely formed in her mind. Yeah, I can't come to your world. What if you... Poseidon looked at her in surprise. Suddenly, he leaned toward her and whispered in her ear, as if he were sharing a dream he had been hiding for a long time with Cecilia. You're right. I never thought of it the other way around. But with you, it seems possible. Cecilia stared at the sea god and barely listened to what he told her next. She needed to see him, to smell his scent, which the light sea breeze carried to her. Poseidon smelled of seawater, fresh morning breeze, and something unusual, spicy but light. Now I'll wake up, and none of this will happen, was the thought that kept running through Cecilia's mind. This is all my dream, my dreams. I wanted to be a mermaid so badly that I changed my whole life because of that passion. I haven't had relationships with men in a long time, as none appeals to me anymore, not like this handsome man. No one compares to him, no one, she thought, wistful at this moment's fleetingness. Cecilia listened to Poseidon. She was already feeling the inevitability of the approaching parting with her whole body. Cecilia did not know what would happen next. They could not stay here on the sailboat, unnoticed by anyone. Soon there would be people on shore, and all she saw would disappear into the depths of the sea. And her new acquaintance, whether he called himself Poseidon or the sea god, would also disappear from her life. Meanwhile, Poseidon waved his hand again, and everything around him was misted. Cecilia felt like she was standing on the deck with both feet, as if she was not wearing her mermaid clothes. She looked down and realized she could see her feet. Instead of a mermaid's tail, she was wearing a swimsuit of an extraordinary blue color, covered with patterns embroidered with precious pearls. Poseidon stood beside her. The woman realized they were no longer standing on the sailboat's deck, but on the beach's sand from which she had swum out to sea. Cecilia suddenly realized he was as firmly on the ground as she was, and no longer had a mermaid's tail. Her new acquaintance's muscular legs were spread wide, his arms at his sides like an experienced sailor. Poseidon was wearing a swimmer's outfit, swim trunks and nothing else. He looked like an ordinary man now. The woman looked at Poseidon in shock, her gaze reading an unspoken question that she did not even need to say out loud. Why? What's going to happen now? Have you stayed with me here on Earth? Poseidon silently held out his hand to her. Cecilia also silently extended her hand to him. Their hands joined. Poseidon's hand was warm, his broad palm completely covering her small palm. Cecilia felt her heart beating somewhere in her throat from the excitement and strangeness of this moment. She did not know how much time Poseidon would spend with her as a man. Still, she was ready to accept at least a couple minutes of that happiness, to be near him, to feel his warmth and tenderness. That he would be gentle with her was clear from his treatment at the beginning of their meeting at sea. Poseidon pulled Cecilia quickly behind him, away from the seashore. The woman and the man walked together along the yellow coastal sand towards the sunrise, the first rays of which had already brightened the cottages on the seashore, and climbed higher and higher on their walls, penetrating everything around with the joy of the beginning of a new day. This is how the love story of Poseidon and an ordinary earthly woman named Cecilia began. She no longer had to think about pleasing someone on purpose. Her man loved her with a special love, unconditionally, as she loved him. The end. Written by Misha Quinn, 2023. All rights reserved. Copyright Misha Quinn, 2023.